Hey friends, before I get started in the episode, I'd like to take a moment to address the June 24th Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. This decision stripped away the legal right to have a safe and legal abortion, protecting access to comprehensive reproductive care, including abortion, threatens the health and independence of all Americans. This decision can also lead to the loss of other rights. To learn more about what you can do to help, go to podvoices.help. I encourage you to speak up, take care, and spread the word. Create Art Podcast. Commentary and interview. The necessity of experimentation. Hi there, friend. This is Timothy Kimo Brien, your head instigator for Create Art Podcast, where I take my 20-plus years of experience in the arts and education world and help you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. Hey, are you paralyzed with fear about trying something new or learning a new technique for your artistic discipline? Are you worried that you're going to fail miserably and lose the audience you've worked so hard to build? Are you just simply afraid of the unknown? Well, today I'm going to talk with you about the necessity of experimentation. And not only will I talk with you about that, but I have a guest who can attest to using experimentation to help his work. So this episode, I'm going to experiment with something new that I don't usually do. I'm going to put the interview first and then talk about my idea on the topic. Now, I'm also using a new tool to help me keep the show focused and on track. So I am practicing what I'm preaching. I am more than ecstatic about the conversation that we have here today. I was recently talking with Steve Harper about his new book of plays and the necessity of experimentation. Let me tell you a little bit about Steve. Now, Steve grew up in a house with a Catholic father and a mother obsessed with Stephen King and true crime novels. As a playwright and TV writer, he enjoys working on character-based dramas that make use of magical realism. So that's a little bit about Steve. So let's talk a little bit about his work here. Now, Steve's plays have been produced and developed by While We Breathe, Vivid Stage, theater project in New Jersey, Classical Theater of Harlem, New York Theater Workshop, New York Stage and Film, and the 24-hour plays on Broadway. He's been at the Tribeca Theater Festival, American Theater Company in Chicago, yes, Northwestern University, Georgia Southern University, Loyola Marymount University, and the Celebration Theater in Louisiana. A new collection of work, which is called A Few Short Plays to Save the World, has been published by Laughing Panda Press. Now, to get more information on Steve and all of his stuff, and trust me, there is a ton more that I could talk about right here, right now, you want to go to harpercreates.com, and of course, the links are going to be in the show notes. So before I go any farther, let me bring the conversation to you that I had with Steve Harper. Well, this month we're actually talking about, the necessity of experimentation. And I've got somebody that I've just met here. His name is Steve Harper, and he's got this great book called A Few Short Plays to Save the World. This is the book that you need to go grab for yourself. If you haven't read plays in a long time like me, and I confessed to Steve before we started recording, it's been since about 2003 since I've read a good, book of plays. But you definitely want to go check that book out and grab it from all your online retailers and whatnot. Steve, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you, talk about the book, talk about experimentation, which I feel like is a way of life. Like there's no, everything that I do, whether it makes me money or doesn't make me money, feels like I'm just rolling the dice creatively. And I feel like that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And, it's all about the experimentation. And we have a similar background. You have a theater background. I have a theater background. Yeah. And I know that with academic theater, which we've both been a part of, some of that experimentation is not really, it's a little bit frowned upon. But, as undergrads and grad students, we push through that and we make fantastic art.
Yes. And of course, it also depends on where you go and where you come from in terms of the kind of institutions that are out there. I mean, I was an acting student at the American Repertory Theater Institute at Harvard, which Bob Brustein created, who was the guy who put the Yale Drama School on the map. And he is, I don't know, he's a bit of a rabble rouser. So we had pretty wild sort of experimentation kind of thrown at us and on the main stage. And it was really encouraged to just kind of get out there and do crazy stuff and to see what happens.
See, I went to the wrong school. I should have gone with you. I'm just saying. I went to Virginia Commonwealth, and I was the wild guy, and I didn't think I was that wild. But that's neither here nor there. Well, to kind of get us started off here, and this is going to be my only curveball question for you.
Okay, fair enough.
As you can see, I've got a lot of records behind me. I've got a lot of vinyl behind me, and big vinyl fan. Just wanted to ask you: is there a Coltrane album, a John Coltrane album that you go to? And if so, which one is that?
Wow, first of all, the answer is no, unfortunately, because I'm not a huge jazz aficionado. I mean, I guess I should be. Sometimes I talk to people, and actually have a friend who produces theater and contributes financially to theater. And we were having this conversation about such things. And when I was telling her that I feel like I don't really get jazz or understand it, she looked at me like I had three heads and was like, I can't believe, So I don't have an answer for that question, unfortunately.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So what kind of music do you like that is experimental?
Wow. Well, lots of times I like to write to things that have things that don't have lyrics. Mm-hmm. So that encompasses a whole bunch of stuff. Sometimes there are movie soundtracks that I'm interested in listening to. Sometimes it's, there are a whole bunch of folks like, I don't know, sort of randomly, like, Todd Boston is a composer whose music I'm interested in. James Newton Howard, I'm often listening to the soundtrack to like The Great Debaters, and looking at my iTunes here, it's just kind of random. Like I'll be at a movie or watching TV or even listening on Sirius on satellite radio, and I will just write down like, who is this, and then I'll just buy. So I have a really eclectic kind of collection of stuff that I just kind of dive into. And I also try to find, when I'm working on something, depending on what it is and how long I'm working on it, I will try to find the right soundtrack, even when I'm just beginning a project, something that can sort of inspire me or sort of feels sort of haunted in the same way. And I have to say too, having had the good fortune of writing for television as well, I do the same thing with TV. Like, I will buy the soundtrack to whatever show that I'm on. And when I'm writing my episodes, I'm cranking the soundtrack and just kind of getting in the vibe of the show and trying to channel something through that. So I do that.
Absolutely. The soundtrack that I always go to when I'm writing really dark things is Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh yeah, sure.
That whole soundtrack there is just, it'll put you in a evil mood.
Yes. And sometimes that's what's needed. So
exactly. Getting into your book here, it's a book of short plays, and I'd like to ask you, what do you think has more impact, short plays or full length plays? Because you've done both.
Yes,
and for a lot of people out there, the TikTok generation, for lack of a better term, they're into stuff that 30 seconds, a minute and a half,
right? So
they kind of gravitate towards those short plays. But for you, what has the most impact?
It's a good question. I feel like there is something incredibly juicy about the short play. I mean, not only is it about our, you talked a little bit about our sort of short attention spans because of because of TikTok and YouTube and all of that. But I also feel like there's something about, there are these evenings of short plays happening all over the country. And there are collections of short plays that sort of sub in particular evenings as like, a whole evening of short plays by, say, somebody like David Ives, or like, people will put together a series of short plays. And so what's kind of fun about short plays to me, and what's really delightful about a lot of the plays in this collection, is that they've been done in evenings like that all across the country. And so I've gotten the chance to see, I love my full length plays and I love the diving into that space. And I feel like by and large, more of my short plays have been produced at more eclectic venues. And so I get to go to Jersey and sort of see what Jersey folks think of like some random play of mine. And I get to, a couple of these plays were done online for Northwestern. I get to see like what those folks are doing, or my plays have been done. Actually, a full length play of mine was done in Georgia Southern, but it's kind of like just getting that vibe and being able to see, many of these plays in many different places has been really exciting. And, and there's something too about the freshness of establishing whatever you need to establish in a really quick, short amount of time. It's like doing a sketch, and then filling in that sketch before the curtain comes down, and seeing how much you can do that and have people understand what it is you're trying to do. I think there's something really fun about it.
Yeah, well, all of these plays in here, there was, I don't want to say there was a playfulness to them, but for me, they were all pretty impactful. My favorite one out of all of them is the namesake one.
Oh, great!
Yeah, that one. Now that one I got to ask you about, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, and you can tell me that.
Oh, hey.
But I'm going to be using my master's degree in that $80,000 degree on this question here. So, but I caught, for me, and like I said, this could just be me, some hinting towards No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yes, sure.
I made some connections with that, with the characters in your play versus the characters in his play.
Mm-hmm.
And so am I wrong with that? Or is that something that, is more open to my own interpretation?
I think all of the above. I think it's in there now that you mention it. And I don't know that I thought about it till this moment. So, but I do think it's definitely in there. You've got the three characters, you've got the fact that they can't get out, and the sense of trying to escape. And what am I doing here? This question really about, who they are and what their purpose is on the planet, and the way they snipe at each other. I think that's all in there. And, what's fascinating to me too, given that the subject is experimentation, is that sometimes these things just sort of pop into my head. I have to say that I have been wanting to put this collection, A Few Short Plays to Save the World, out for quite a while. And when I was thinking about it, when I was thinking about a collection of plays of mine, I was on a plane actually, and I thought that a great title for the collection could be A Few Short Plays to Save the World. And then I thought, in the same plane ride, there should be a play that's in the collection called A Few Short Plays to Save the World. So the experiment of, let me dream up this thing that I want to do, this collection, and then let me dream up this title, and then let me find what the title belongs to, is something that I tend to do a lot. Like, I will come up with a lot of titles and then either write or not write the plays that belong to them. But this play emerged out of the idea of how those few words, fit together. And now what belongs to those, what's that a title of,
Mm-hmm. I work in a similar fashion. I do a lot of poetry, and I always start with the title. That always gets me going because that'll tell me, is this going to be a happy poem? Is this going to be a bad poem?
Yeah, fascinating.
Am I listening to Eyes Wide Shut while I'm writing this poem?
Yeah. And I should say, for people who have yet to read these plays and get this book, which I do hope you do out there, that play, A Few Short Plays to Save the World, is about these three playwrights who find themselves in this space. They don't know where they are. They wake up next to each other. They don't know each other. And they're sort of trapped in this strange sort of, comedic Twilight Zone kind of space, and realize that the three of them are playwrights and that they're in some sort of weird contest. They answer the same ad, and they really, they need to sort of figure out how to kind of solve their way out of this strange space that they're in. I'll say that much about it. So, so I think there's something for everyone within that play and within a lot of the plays in here, that whether you know No Exit or Sartre or any of that stuff, there's crazy fun, crazy sort of diverse, weird Twilight Zone-like fun, magical realism and all sorts of stuff, diverse characters, blah, 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 in this collection that I'm super proud of.
As well, you should be, and they're very poignant characters too. They're characters that, as somebody reading this for the first time, I can see those people. The way you write and the way you color the characters, and I don't mean color as in skin tone. I mean colors. How their mannerisms, how they talk, how they move around the space. My former degree is in theater pedagogy directing, so I'm already thinking, oh well, how does this look here? How do I've already got the lighting design done for you, so don't worry about that.
Let's do it. Let's find.
Okay, then I'm done. Well, we'll do my favorite one first, and then we'll do a couple of the others for sure. We'll do a whole night here in Fredericksburg.
Fantastic.
So this collection of plays. I know some of them are before the pandemic, and some of them are during the pandemic. And they've been performed online and in person. Mm-hmm. But why this book right now? Why do people need to read this book right now?
Yeah, I think there is something about. I think the notion of. There are all these things that we're talking about sort of in the world and in the news and, with our neighbors and with our families. And I think one of the things that happens that I sort of feel is true, it has been true in my life is, I love my family. I grew up in a family though, where we didn't talk about a lot of the sort of juicy stuff. We talked about some things, but not necessarily. Right. And that sometimes for me, when I went to college and when I encountered people who were not like me, suddenly I was, sort of delightfully sort of urged/forced into these deeper conversations about things perhaps we didn't talk about at home, and I'm not talking about like murderers or anything, but I'm talking about like, issues of belonging and issues of diversity and issues of media and how we see each other and what we put out in the world and all of that stuff. So I think that one of the fun things about this collection is, these are different people talking. These are Black people talking to white people. These are, straight people talking to gay people. These are people of different political persuasions, like sitting down and having these, knock down, drag out, comedic, ultimately, conversations that I think are really, emblematic of the kinds of things that we're talking about or not talking about today. So that's number one. Number two is, I, as a theater person, I was an actor before I was a writer, and I spent a lot of time in my theater studies days looking for material and not necessarily finding it. Like we would do the classics, I did scenes from Streetcar Named Desire and, Glass Menagerie and all that stuff. But these were parts that as a Black man, I would never be cast in.
Right.
Unless somebody were doing a concept or a non-traditional blah, blah, blah. And so I found myself always as an actor hungry for material that I would actually be cast. And I think when I started writing, it came out of the desire to create stuff so that me and people like me and also people not like me can have parts to play. So, so there are Middle Eastern characters in here. There are Indian folks. There's, black people and white people and, older people and younger people. And there's a lot of, it's just sort of like a stew of perspectives. And to me, that's really fun and necessary. And my hope is that people out there who are listening to us, and or who know people who are studying theater and looking for material, come to this collection and collections like it so that people can find material that is new and fresh and different and not the same old scene you've seen in class, not the same old scene you've done in showcase, but stuff feels contemporary and visceral and somehow fun.
In my background, when I lived in Chicago, I was the straight guy for a Latino sketch comedy troupe. And that was, I got immersed in that world, which was fantastic.
That was fun.
Oh, it was a hoot. It was a hoot. When I'm reading through your book, I'm not feeling that anyone is portrayed as a straight character, or a token character, I guess I should say. And everyone because they are short plays and you have so much space, everything is very immediate. Everything is needed. It's kind of reminds me of poetry where, it's not a classic long novel. It's everything that's needed there is there. For the director and for the actors, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
I'm glad to hear you say that. There's, and I can't tell you who it was. I wish I could attribute this to a human being, but somebody said, and I heard this when I first got into the world of TV writing. Somebody said of TV writing, what I think is true of short plays, which is that it's sort of like a bonsai tree. It's like everything's there, but it's smaller. It's shorter than, for TV, it's shorter than a movie. For short plays, they're shorter than full-length plays. And you've got to sculpt in stuff that is, where the characters are real, where the points of view are real, where the conflicts are real. Otherwise it'll sort of fall flat or it'll feel like a sketch. There's a very specific kind of thing that happens in plays like this that I think is also really enjoyable to craft,
Talking about the TV writing versus the play writing. So you've got a lot of different hats that you wear. Which discipline, which artistic discipline for you allows you to do the most experimentation?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. It's such a great question. And I think I'll tell you, the most fun thing for me in terms of television, so currently I am the co-executive producer of the third season of DC's Stargirl, which is airing right now on the CW when we're recording this. And there's something incredibly fun about TV in that, as opposed to all of us out there who are involved in theater or other things, TV has money. So if you dream it up in the writer's room, they're going to make it or build it or blow it up or buy it. And there's something incredibly delightful about that, and sometimes in the world of theater, you can you have to hint at things, but you can't necessarily get sort of the full Megillah. So the fun thing about the TV space is that they'll make it or buy it. The fun thing about the writing space is that I can always put myself to work. So I never have to have a day where I'm, dying to work, because really all I need to do is sit down, grab a pen and a piece of paper or my computer or my, iPad, whatever, and I can create. So that's the visceralness of being able to do something on the page that then will live, that wasn't there before. I mean, I'm sure you experienced the same as a poet, is incredibly fun. And then there's the question of, what do we do next? So I feel like there's the sort of both and of it is I love to write stuff, but I also love to make stuff. So for me, I think the experimentation comes sort of in the space that sort of goes back and forth in between those things. Recently I've written a solo show, never done a solo show, but I'm in the process of putting it together. So, I've written this thing and now I'm learning this thing for performance that I'm going to get up in front of people. And, there's so much experimentation in that. And I created this world and this character and this story And now I'm stepping in to own it in a different way, which allows me a new perspective on, oh, I don't need this line, or, oh, that's a little tangential, or, oh, the point really is this, or, so I get to kind of play back and forth in the space of writing and in the space of performing. So somewhere in the midst of that, there's all of these chances to experiment, which I think is really, really fun.
And when you're doing that solo show, are you taking bits and pieces from that experimentation and putting it to the other areas, the other disciplines that you're involved in? With obviously a solo show, it's a bit of playwriting there, but TV writing and everything else that you're involved in. Are you finding that you can learn from that experimentation and then shoot those lessons out to other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it feels like it's all happening at once. There's no way to be working on this piece without thinking about, I have a director, but without thinking about the direction of it, without thinking about what it looks like visually, without thinking about like what the costumes are, or what's the clothing I'm going to wear, or I had this moment just the other day, and we may do this, we may not, who knows? Speaking of experimentation, like I have a friend who's, an extremely talented guitar player, plays, flamenco and all of these, kind of amazing, Latin music styles, and is a composer and stuff. And I just had the thought the other day, I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm sort of like, oh, what would it be like if while I'm doing my solo show, like in the show, like he's on stage with me and he's emphasizing or underscoring the things that I'm saying by playing guitar riffs, or by whatever, by sort of, maybe I stop and he goes for a while and back and forth. And, what a fun opportunity to kind of try something like that and see what it adds to this piece. All of that is, it's like, let's just see what happens.
I'm going to encourage you to do that, mainly because, and this is my $80,000 degree thing going on here. I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Frank. He used to be out on the West Coast.
No.
He's he's passed away. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
But he would do these audio dramas before there was podcasting. He was doing that in the 80s from KCRW up in Wilmington.
Sure.
And he would have these one-man pieces, or maybe 2-3 people at the worst. And very cerebral, very weird stuff, very avant-garde stuff. But I saw him in Chicago at the Goodman Theater, and he had a just electric guitar player with him, and he'd read his stuff, and the guitar player would underscore just like you're saying.
Wow!
And then play a few licks or a few riffs, and then he would come back to Joe. That place, Goodman, I think, I don't know, it holds like 200, 300, maybe 500 people. You could hear a pin drop.
Wow.
You could hear a pin drop. So I'm going to give that to you for homework.
Wow.
But when I hear you talking about that, I'm like, go for it, because it will pay off. It will definitely. I mean, if your one-man show is anything like your book, it's going to pay off in dividends.
Wow. I love
so
that.
Definitely let us know when that show pops out. And okay. I can't fly out to LA, but I will find a way to see it.
Great. Excellent. Wow. Thank you.
Absolutely. So with Create Art Podcast, we're talking to a lot of brand new artists.
Yes.
People that are just getting into it. And, a lot of people are used to the, tried and true. A lot of people go through academia to enhance their talent and enhance their knowledge of the arts. Obviously, you went to a better school than I did because you had a lot more fun than me. But what would you recommend, sir, the brand new artists, and they're thinking about doing some experimentation with their work? What would be, maybe 1 or 2 things bits of advice that you would give to them?
Yes. Well, I love this question. It's such a great question. I think one of the things that I feel like I need, that we all need, are role models, mentors, community. So one thing is find your peeps. If you're a playwright, find a playwriting group, find the people locally who are experimenting in the art that you are, whether you're a sculptor or a painter or poet, and find those people and ask a lot of questions. I feel like I was calling a playwright friend this morning. We're making plans for this show, and I was having all these thoughts in my head. And I just called up a playwright friend, and I was like, "What do you think of this? And what about this? I'm not sure what to do here." And blah blah, And I'm just getting feedback from her about what I might do and what I might try. And I feel like that's part of it. So find a group, ask for help, and then I think just try stuff. The more I can sit down and just try stuff. Like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, or even to map out plans. I've got several whiteboards in my office here, and a couple of them have on, this thing. This is an idea, and here's another title, and this thing, and there's an outline for something over there, and there's a title for something over there, and there's several titles there, and I feel like that's part of as much as I can find ways to channel whatever the North Star is, so that I can see that, that might be the next thing, or that might be the next thing, or, it's a little bit like that. So, so find a community, ask for help, try stuff out, and then look for your own creative North Star for like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
And it takes, it takes a degree of bravery to go and do that.
Oh, entirely.
Yeah. I mean, being an actor on stage, better than I've acted on stage, and oh my gosh.
Yes.
It is the scariest thing you can do, but it's also the most energizing thing you can do.
And I'm so glad you said that, because it's very easy for us, we in the audience, whatever we're in the audience of, whether it's, music or whatever it is, to think, we sort of sit there and we're sitting back and we think that whoever's up there is, fully confident all the time. And, just came out of the womb, like, playing the oboe like that, or whatever it is. And the truth is, it's scary for everybody. Like, we're all ramping up the bravery every day, every week, every month, to continue to do the things that we do. And I feel like we don't talk about that as artists, I think, enough, to say that we are, we're constantly stepping back into the dark so that we can figure out our way back out to the light. And that's, if somebody reads my collection of plays, I've failed if too many of these plays, or two of these plays, are so similar that it's like, oh, he did that before. He's just doing a retread. So every time, I sit down at the page, I'm sure the same is true of you as a poet, try to do something brand new, something I've never done before, something I've never tried before. And so it's scary. It's like, I don't know how to do this. I've never done a solo show before, and yet here I am stepping into that space, because that's what experimentation is. That's what it means to be an artist, to just throw stuff against the wall and try something new.
So speaking about that, what would you say with the experimentation that you have done, what's been the most successful to you? Not necessarily commercially successful or anything like that, but what's been the most successful experiment that you've tried? And conversely, what's the one that you were just like, oh my God, I should never do that again?
Well, I don't know that I live in the world of I should never do that again. I think that, and this is probably true of every writer, I've written a lot of things that have never seen the light of day. Like plays that I love, where I sort of poured my heart and soul out on the page, and they're sitting in the drawer, or they're sitting on my computer, or, I keep sending them out to places and they've never been produced, and I haven't had the opportunity or the wherewithal to produce them myself. So that's challenging. And yet I do feel like everything that I've made sort of sets me up for the next thing. It gives me that much more information about how to attack the next piece, whether the piece is successful or not. I have actually two answers to the successful part. And one of them is this collection. I have to say, because I think, it's an important part of the story, that this collection of short plays to save the world, published by Laughing Panda Press, was really, was created and published by me. I am Laughing Panda Press. And so part of what's delightful about that and important to mention about that is, as a, I said I work on TV, and that's great. I'm not a famous TV writer. I'm not a famous playwright. And so by and large, collections of plays, sort of greatest hits, short plays kind of thing, are never going to happen in our world of commerce unless you're whatever, David Mamet or, whatever, Tom Stoppard, whoever, right? And I'm not those people. So the opportunity was for me to create the circumstance under which this collection could live. And that's a big experiment for me, and one that I'm tremendously proud of, which is also why I want people out there to go and buy it. But it's a labor of love. I feel like the chance is for this material to live not only for me and for people I know, but for people all over the country and all over the world, where you can buy this just about anywhere. And so that feels like a huge triumph for me to create the opportunity, this brand new experimental opportunity for people to get to know my work in a way that they haven't. The other one that I'll mention is that I created a web series several years ago called Send Me, which is now on YouTube and premiered on BET.com, which is about a Black woman who has the magical power to send Black people back in time to the days of slavery. And people want to go the way people want to climb mountains or jump out of airplanes or do dangerous drugs, and it's really about the fact that her husband, which is the part that I play in the web series, doesn't want her to keep doing this. And she's earning some money by doing it. And, they're having a back and forth. So, one of the reasons I'm super proud of that is, I created it. I crowdfunded for it. We made it. I tried to put as many of my sort of famous friends in it, and we ended up doing tremendously well. We got, 1.66 million views on BET.com in a month. We got an Emmy nomination. The lead actor got an Emmy nomination. It was an incredibly powerful success. And it really just came out of like me saying, what happens if I try to do this thing that I've never done before? So that is super cool. I'm really proud of that.
That's awesome. That's goes back to our conversation here with experimenting with it. What happens if I have this idea? And who's going to stop you? Who's going to stop you from doing it?
That's right.
Only you. Only you will stop you.
That's right. I do want people to know that there are, when I talk about like finding people out there to connect with it, that there are folks who are doing that. I got certified a couple of years ago as a creativity coach through something called the Creativity Coaching Association. And, I coach writers through something called Your Creative Life. So you can find me online in that space. But also, I just want to give a shout out to the Creativity Coaching Association, because there are coaches all over the world and a directory of those coaches. And people can go to the website and find people to work with, find people to get advice or support from. One of the guy who founded Creativity Coaching is a man named Eric Maisel, who's a PhD and a writer, was one of my teachers there. He's written a ton of books about creativity and about, being your own creative coach and supporting yourself and sustaining yourself. And so that's really the thing that I want to come back to, is that there are so many opportunities for us to teach each other how to be self-sustaining as artists and to support each other, cheer each other on, because it's a challenging, sometimes lonely, sometimes scary prospect to be out there in the world, literally doing things that no one has ever done. And, and then attempting, say, to show it to people, to make a living at it, to, broadcast it or advertise it or whatever. There's so much precariousness in that space. And I feel like the best thing we can possibly do is cheer each other on and, lean into the resources. Because I think, we all know about the resources for lawyers or doctors or insurance salesmen or whatever. And we rarely know or embrace or trust or find the resources for artistic people like us. So just want to give a shout out for all of those people out there who are cheering other artists on. And, we can all do that for each other, and we can all find the people when when we need that kind of encouragement.
All right. So that was a really fun conversation that I had with Steve Harper. And especially, the last part, I really enjoyed, and definitely check it out. And after I hung up with him, I did definitely check out the website he was talking about for the creative coaching. It is a fantastic thing. And hey, he put it out there for us. He has his own program. He can coach you as well. So definitely check that out for yourselves. So getting back into the idea here, getting back into the topic here, why is experimentation scary? Well, it's scary because it can be messy and unplanned. And now I'm not talking about happy accidents. Thank you, Bob Ross. I am talking about trying to try something totally new, or trying a new technique for your discipline and putting it out there for the world to see. Maybe like last month's discussion on creating out in the wild, you're trying to go out to the public and practice your art. There are several unknowns. Probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you is that the wait staff will tell you that you can't do your art in their business. Maybe, just maybe, your art supplies will get stolen. And then, then again, maybe somebody sees your work out there and decides to buy all your paintings, buy your books, whatever you have, and you become an instant monetary success. The thing is you don't know. I don't know. And that can be scary for folks. Maybe it took everything you had to do a painting and put it out after years and years of practice in a certain style. And now here comes Tim saying, hey, try something new. And, and I'm saying, try, and I am saying try something new. But I also want to commend you for trying anything at all and putting it out there. It does take a lot of bravery, like we were talking about with Steve there, to put your ideas out in the world. Good on you for doing that. Now let's try something new. Now, sticking to the point of this being scary because you've done things a certain way, or you've presented your work in a certain way. Try experimenting with a new style or subject matter that can lead you to some growth in your preferred way of doing your art. By adjusting your canvas, and I'm using, my quote, my finger quotes here, and not using, the usual rectangle to present your work. Break out of that a few times and see if you can't find something new from a new style or new subject matter that you can use, and find something that you're, comfortable with. Worst thing that can happen is nobody picks up the work. And I doubt that one piece of work or trying a new style is going to destroy everything you've built up in the world. Let's take a look at Bob Dylan when he went electric. Yeah, he did lose some fans, but that was almost 60 years ago. Most of you listening to this podcast do know who Bob Dylan is. Maybe you're a fan. And the old guy is still killing it in the music world and the painting world. Now, I'm not saying experiment just for experiment's sake. And I'm not saying you're going to be the next Bob Dylan, but he planned out his experimentation, and he knew that there's going to be a risk in going electric and doing that approach, yet he still did it. And I'd argue that his acoustic music benefited him from going electric. There comes a time when you hit a brick wall with your creativity, especially if you don't expand your subject matter and try new things. And I know I'm guilty of that. So many of my poems I have are of coffee shops and dark-haired baristas with a heart of gold. Way too many of them. That's why I started doing the National Poetry Writing Month, or NaPoWriMo. Did that a few years back, and it gave me a chance to break out of the corner that I had painted myself in, and it actually fueled two of my poetry books. One of the latest poems has the speaker as a deep dish Chicago pizza, letting other pizzas know that her man doesn't want them. Yeah, that's quite a stretch from the dark-haired baristas. And when audiences have seen this, almost 50-year-old white guy on stage performing this piece, they seem to forget for a few moments of who I am and imagine if a pizza could talk and what it would say. Now, when I started doing National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, that helped me overcome my block of writing a novel-length piece. Now, before that, I had a master's thesis, which was my longest work to date, and it was just under 60 pages. Now, trust me, nobody wants to read that thesis unless you're interested in the Roman Nouveau movement or Marguerite Duras. What experimenting did for me on this mental block was allow me to go ahead and stop the excuses and write a novel. Now, it took 2 months of my life and is just under 100,000 words, and it's not finished yet, but I really enjoyed the experience and proved to myself, first and foremost, that I could accomplish something like this if I really committed to the process and did the work. Maybe you're in one of those two scenarios with your work, and I want to encourage you to give experimentation a try. It could just be what you need. When you get stuck on a topic or a subject, experimentation is going to be what you need to get out of your rut. And maybe it's going to give you a new path to go. See what lies down that way. Now, when we talk bravery, I think we also need to talk about failure for a moment. I know this is on your mind. You're probably saying, Tim, if I try a new technique, it's going to look like a 4-year-old on crack made it. Hey, it might. You're right about that. If you look around my studio, you see a lot of bad art that was made by me. But that's the thing. It was made by me, and I used the lessons from that work to improve later work. The big idea here is to get over the fear of failure. You're going to fail. There. Happy now? You could have on your tombstone that he or she never failed. But then you never contributed or inspired someone to take up the pen or the paintbrush or the baton. I am more of a doer than a person who sits by and lets others, do the things that I want to do. You never know what is going to turn out unless you give it a shot. You may fail, and failure is okay. You tried, and that's all that matters in the long run. The real failure is that you want to avoid is not learning from that failure and being afraid to fail in the first place. You don't have a chance if you don't try. You will fail 100% of the time if you don't get out there and give it a go. Realize it's going to be scary. It's going to be uncomfortable. And there's going to be people like me out there ready to hold your hand. And there's going to be people like Steve out there ready to hold your hand and go on that journey with you. Trying is beautiful. If it doesn't come out right, that's fine. Not trying because of fear of failure has no redeeming qualities. It's not ugly or beautiful. It is simply nothing. And I don't want you to be a nothing. The last thing I want to talk about here is dealing with experimentation is growth. And, we've kind of hinted at this throughout this whole talk, but growth does happen with experimentation. What type of growth will you get from experimentation? Well, the first thing I can think of is perspective. When I changed the topic of my poetry, I found new things I could write about, and I could examine what I had written about and change it up. I'm no longer writing about that coffee shop in Abilene, Texas anymore. For so many years I was just stuck on that one coffee shop in Abilene, Texas. But now I'm comparing it with a coffee shop in Fredericksburg, Virginia that I go to every Friday night. Now, as a man of almost 50 years, I look for different things than when I was, 20 years old. And I experiment with my work more and take more chances as an older person than when I was just starting out. That's the funny thing with age. It does make you more likely to experiment more for a few reasons. First thing is you have nothing to prove. You know where your right and left limits are, and you have more knowledge of what has come before, so you can avoid the pitfalls that you ran into as a youth. I know it seems counterintuitive to me, old folks being more experimental than young folks, but it's true. You know where your boundaries are. You know how to break those boundaries and still make them understandable. versus just flailing around the world and hoping that, something connects with somebody. I think that's the key to knowing what came before and educating yourself on your art and knowing what is going on currently. So that way you can make those experiments hit more than they miss. Well, if you got something out of this episode, I'd ask you to share it with a friend. It may be just what they need to hear. If you have questions about the show, feel free to reach out to me and tell me what you're working on in your neck of the woods. You can email me at timothy@createartpodcast.com. And if you like the show, go ahead and reach out. I'd love to feature your work here. If you like this podcast, then you can check out my other podcasts. Find a Podcast About helps you find your next binge-worthy podcast and outsmart the algorithm. You can find that one at findapodcastabout.xyz. Now, I also run a podcast called Clearly Obtuse, and that's where I explore what a avant-garde podcast would sound like. And you can find that one at clearlyobtuse.com. So go out there. Try something that may or may not work. Tame that inner critic. Create more than you consume. Now go out there. Create some art for somebody you love. Yourself. Oh, and by the way, go read a book of short plays like we talked about today. Until next time.